Hey, everybody. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to say that this week marks 5 years of the Stacks, and I honestly cannot believe that this little idea I had to talk about books with some of my friends who love books has turned into the Stacks as we know it now. So for everyone who's listened to the show, for everyone who's told a friend, join the Stacks Pack on Patreon, given us a rating or review, or even listened to it and hated me so much you turned it off. I just want to say a huge thank you. And I'm really excited. There's some fun things coming from me for the rest of the year to celebrate the 5-year anniversary. So please stay tuned for that. And I won't talk too much because I'll probably start crying. But again, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. And if you haven't yet, go join the Stacks Pack on Patreon so we can continue to have this show week after week after week for the next at least 5 years. Thank you. Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and today we're speaking with best-selling author and poet Clint Smith. Clint is also a friend of the podcast, and he is back in The Stacks for more literary goodness after his first appearance in 2021. Clint's here to talk about his latest book, a poetry collection called Above Ground. It was just released last week, and it is a powerful and wise rumination on the complex experience of fatherhood amid the tumult of our modern world. Clint is an Atlantic staff writer who wrote the award-winning and critically acclaimed How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America, and his incredible debut poetry collection, Counting Descent. Today, we talk about the pressure to follow up How the Word is Passed. We talk a little bit about soccer, and of course, the many books that have shaped Clint's life. Our book club selection for April is Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude by Ross Gay. We will discuss that poetry collection on April 26th with Clint Smith. Quick reminder, everything we talk about on each episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. Listen, if you love The Stacks and you want more of it, please join us over on Patreon. That's our exclusive community for supporters of the show. You can join for just $5 a month and you get all sorts of things like our very active Discord community, bonus episodes, and our monthly meetups to discuss our book club picks. Also, you get to know that your $5 are going to make the Stacks possible. I've got a lot of exciting things coming up later this year, and with your support, it's going to be possible. So please head to patreon.com/thestacks and join us now. A quick shout out to some of our newest members of the Stacks Pack: Catherine Booth, Eileen McGraw, Rachel Michelle Maxwell, and Janelle Hill. Thank you all so much, and thank you to the entire Stacks Pack. I could not make this show without you. All right, now it is time for my conversation with Clint Smith. All right, everybody, I am so excited. I get to welcome back a friend of the podcast, Clint Smith. You all must remember he was on the show in June, I believe, of 2021 for his last book, which was How the Word is Passed. And now he's back for his new book, which just came out at the end of March. It is called Above Ground. It is poems. Clint, welcome back to the Stacks.
It's so good to be here. My favorite podcast.
My favorite guest. Well, I can't go on record. One of my faves.
One of the faves.
One of my faves. Top tier. Okay, welcome back. How have you been?
Things have been good. It's been a wild couple years. I think it's difficult to overstate the extent to which my life has changed since How the Word is Passed came out. It's been wild.
In what ways?
I could have never dreamed that the book would get the response that it has. So many incredible writers write so many incredible books all the time that for one reason or another never reach the audience they deserve. And so I feel just immensely lucky that the book continues to find new readers. It just kind of keeps going. It's got like a long tail. I'm always getting messages from people who've just been introduced to the book, and the sorts of messages I get from people, just students who read the book in their high school history class, who said it transformed their understanding of their own lives, of people who read it with their, Fox News watching granddad, who said we never talked about this kind of thing, but your book opened up space for this to happen. People who have messaged to say they visited the sites in the book, people who have messaged to say that the book has pushed them to think more critically or to even engage with historical sites in their own communities in different ways, right? People who pass the same cemetery every day on the way to work, or pass the same, live down the street from this museum that they never visited. And they just, and they talk about how my book gave them new tools with which to think about these places and new ways to think about public memory and iconography. And yeah, it's been amazing. I really can't say enough about how much it's meant to get these sorts of messages from readers. And this because I think I talked about it on the podcast last time, but like, I really wrote this book for like a 15, 16-year-old version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to write the sort of book that was going to help a high school version of Clint, that would have given him the language, the toolkit, the history with which to more effectively understand why his state, his city, his country looked the way that it did. And there was a moment where I Zoomed with students at my former high school who were reading the book. And it's, the history teachers at Ben Franklin High School in New Orleans had assigned it to their students. And it was this sort of full circle moment because I wrote it for the version of me that was those kids, right? And I was like, man, they're sitting in the literal classrooms, right? That I sat in, that I so desperately tried to orient the project to. And there've been so many incredible moments, but
did they like the book or did they roast you?
I mean, there was no roasting.
Well, I know how teenagers are. Like they would be like, look, oh, okay, you went here. Like, what was your, whatever.
Right. They probably did it at lunchtime.
Sure,
not in class. Yeah. No, they held me down. I appreciated it.
I love it. So I wasn't going to start here, but this is something that I want to talk about. So we'll start here and then we'll kind of go back. We're going out of order because you're a repeat. One of the things about you that I think people who were introduced to you through How the Word Is Passed might not know is that you are a poet, and you are a your first book is Counting Descent, which was a collection of poems that actually is like the perfect pairing for How the Word Is Passed. And now you're returning to poetry. And you've had this success with you're talking about with this book and your, top 10 books of 2021 from the New York Times and your National Book Award and all of these things. What is the pressure, if any, or what is the feeling about releasing this new thing into the world that is connected but is not necessarily the same kind of thing? I think a lot of people follow up their successful book with like How the Word Is Passed too, like monuments in Washington, D.C., like more, like, and you've gone fully, I'm writing poems about parenting and family and legacy and death and grief and joy. And like, I'm writing poems, and like it's 100 pages and there's no Thomas Jefferson in sight. So what is that feeling, whether it's pressure, anxiety, excitement for you going into this book launch?
Yeah, it's funny. I always think about my homie Wesley Lowery, great journalist, great writer, who will have a new book coming out himself later in the year. And one of the things he said after all the sort of wildness happened with How the Word Is Passed, he's like, man, the sequel, like, there's got to be a sequel, and you got to call it Too Pass, Too Furious. And I was just like, I wasn't thinking of a sequel, but I might just so that I can
just so you can title it that. Yes.
Just so I can title it that and make my own franchise. It's interesting. In so many ways, I'm so grateful that I'm following How the Word Is Passed with a book in a completely different genre. First off, the book came out almost 2 years ago, but in so many ways, it almost doesn't feel like it. I feel like I'm still riding in the car that How the Word Is Passed built, to like use a clunky metaphor, but it's extraordinary how much it still feels like a huge part of my life. And we just released the paperback.
I know.
Like just a few
I was
months ago.
confused. I actually was like, wait, was Clint on in 2022 or 2020? I like literally had to go back and look to see. I was like, I thought it was 2021, but yeah, it was a long
I mean,
tail.
they kept it in hardcover for a long time and released it in paperback just at the end of basically early January of this year. And so in so many ways, the book has now gotten a second life and been introduced to many readers for the first time. And when I first decided that I was going to publish this next book 2 years after How the Warriors passed. I was like, oh, 2 years. That's such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like great. And it's interesting the way it doesn't feel like a very long time. But again, I'm immensely, endlessly grateful for this long life that How the Warriors Passed has gotten to live. But I think it makes me feel even more grateful that the book that follows it is like the texture of this project is just so different.
Yeah.
You know, it's I think there would have been a little bit of pressure following How the Warriors Passed with another narrative nonfiction project. But the thing about Above Ground is that, and this is the case for so many books, but even though this book is coming out in, end of March 2023, these poems have been with me for years. Like these are poems that I started writing when my wife was pregnant in 2016.
Wow.
And so, this book it's a sort of largely chronological following of our journey from first becoming pregnant, or even before that, being told that we probably couldn't get pregnant, becoming pregnant, and then, having, when my wife had my son, and then my wife had our daughter, and then the sort of larger, what it means to raise children amid the sort of larger socio-political, historical realities shaping all of our lives at the same time. And the poems just sort of, poetry for me is both the creation of art, but it's also the mechanism through which I do my best thinking. And poetry is kind of the act of paying attention. And so, an example I give is like, if you walk past the same tree every day in front of your house, like you see the tree, it's there, what the tree looks like if somebody asks you to describe it. But it's something different when you stop and look at that tree with a different level of intention. And poetry is almost the act of stopping to look at the tree. It is because when you pass the tree, you see it, but you don't see it with the specificity, with the granularity that you would if somebody was like, write a poem about that tree,
right,
or take a photograph of that tree, right? So, when you look at the tree now, you might home in on a particular leaf, and you might see the way that leaf is actually a few different shades of green, or you might see the way that the edges of the leaf are turning yellow as the season begins to change, or the way that the leaf has a hole in it at the end where a caterpillar took a bite, right? These small things, but allows you to see the thing that you otherwise see every day,
right,
with a different level of intention and specificity. And I feel like these poems are that in the context of parenthood, right?
Yeah.
They're sort of these small poetic archives, these attempts to capture sort of time capsules and to hold on to these moments of joy, of wonder, of fear, of insecurity, and to sort of capture them and to hold on to them. And in so many ways, what it does is it reminds me of how fleeting these moments are, right? Because this is the most cliche thing in the world, but that like it flies by. It goes by so quickly, but it does. It goes by so fast. And so all that's to say is just, these are poems I wrote for me, right? Like, and there are hundreds of these poems about parenthood that aren't in this book, but that operate and play a similar role in terms of just ensuring that I am taking the time to reflect and be present in what is otherwise like a wild, wild west of living, being parents to young kids.
Do you feel like, I love this analogy of like writing the poem is like a way to like really stop and like look at the tree. But as you were saying that, you said like take a photograph. And I'm just thinking like, is that not what all art is in some way? Is like you're using a different medium to talk about or think about or reflect on said tree. So if you're a dancer and you take the time to choreograph a piece about a tree, you're still doing that same like kind of specificity. And I'm thinking like, because you write poems, but you also write narrative nonfiction. And I'm sure if you had to write narrative nonfiction about the tree, you probably would also stop and like talk about those things. So I just think it's like interesting to think like whatever your potential medium is, art is the way to think about the tree.
No, I think that's absolutely true.
Because I have no doubt if you wrote a memoir about parenting, it would be just as beautiful and and in depth, and you would still capture a lot of these things. It would be different because it would be a memoir and not poems. But knowing you and how detailed you are and how careful you are with your work, I think you would write a really good memoir about parenting too.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
Not that I know if you can even write a memoir, I got to be honest.
I do not feel equipped to write a memoir about parenting. It's interesting you say that about narrative nonfiction, no, and details, because my editor, Vanessa Mobley, who edited How the Word Is Passed, she was extraordinary. She's since left Little Brown and is now at the New York Times doing amazing things. But it's funny that we're talking about the trees, because literally, I mean, you read How the Word Is Passed, so you know. I love exposition. Yes. I love details. I will sit there and describe the tree for several pages. The problem is that that's what I did in all of my first drafts. And so
and she got out the red pen.
And she was like, okay, cool. Lovely tree.
Glad you know that. Yes. Now get to Monticello.
Exactly.
Where's the front door?
Where we have, it's been 7 pages and we haven't stepped foot inside Jefferson's home yet. Yes. So, and so, yeah, I mean, I think any genre, I think you're absolutely correct that art plays that role for so many artists, right? Mm-hmm. I know my brother-in-law is a big photographer, and I know that he talks about it the same way, right? I might write a poem about the tree. He might take photographs of the tree, and those photographs might allow him to see the tree in ways that I don't even see with my poem. And my poem might allow him to see the tree in ways and that's why it's so important to have various forms of art and various mediums and different genres. For me, the thing I like about poetry is that you can begin a poem with a question, and it doesn't necessitate that you have to end the poem with an answer. If anything, you end the poem with more questions or more wonderings, right? So many of my poems are just sort of I think about a poem where my son is asking me about death, and there's a version of that somebody might write an op-ed about, or an essay about, or an academic article about, where they sort of outline what are the best ways to talk to your children about life. And I'm not equipped to answer those questions. And for me, what the poem is a sort of exploration of the uncertainty of did I answer that the right way? I think I did my best in that moment. I could have said this, but I could have said that. And I ended up saying this, and it felt clunky, and it felt, and so the poem for me is just that space with which to excavate and question and wonder, and then the poem ends, and you're like, well, I don't know, but this is it. But it captures the moment, and memoirs can be written in all sorts of different ways, and I'm sure that. But for me, this felt like the medium through which I could most effectively just sort of reflect on these parts of this journey.
Yeah. So I've read Above Ground twice now. I read it in December when I first got it because I couldn't wait. And then I read it yesterday because I wanted to refresh. And one of the things that struck me on the second read that I completely missed on the first read, which, okay, this is going to be embarrassing when I tell you what it is, because you're going to be like, I started the collection here, is this idea of all at once, which is the title of your first poem. And when I went into the collection the first time, I knew that it was Clint's poetry collection on parenting. So I went in thinking that. And when I went back and I read it yesterday, the first poem details all of these things going on. Fires and family and, diagnoses and all of these things. And that all at once-ness, for me now, that's the center of this collection. It doesn't feel like a collection about parenting anymore. There are a lot of parts about parenting, but what it feels like is a collection about all of the things that were going on since you became a parent. And for you, that looks like, the passing of your grandmother. It looks like, global events that have happened. It looks like your wife's complications with her pregnancy. It looks like a swing. An ode to a swing or a bear hug. It looks like grocery shopping. It looks like, one of my favorite poems, or one of the poems that I think is really interesting, is there's a poem about people congratulating you on being super dad, and you being like, yes, I am super dad, but also my wife does these things every day. And that really changed the collection for me, because I feel like in my mind, and maybe because this is something I'm pushing against personally, I feel like parenting is like a small part of a lot of things, and it's not often contextualized in the bigger part of a lot of things, right? Like it's like
Mm,
people ask me like, "Oh, what's it like to be a twin mom?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't really take that out of what it's like to have survived this pandemic so far and to have become a parent at the beginning, to have been pregnant and had children right before this happened." And so I don't know. There's not really a question there, but I would love for you to talk about this idea of all at once and let me know if I am onto the right track at all.
no, I mean, there's a reason that the book began that way. And I love you saying that because I think it's also just a reminder of, and we're having this sort of meta conversation about art now, but like, I think that's what happens with all kinds of art.
And like, especially with books, for me, it's also like to have been told what it was about, like from
Mm,
marketing
right.
versus once I read it, I knew what it was about. And then when I reread it, I was able to be like, oh, this is a book about parenting. And then the first thing I see, I'm like, this isn't a book about parenting. I was lied to.
Yeah. I mean, and I think your point about like when people ask you about what it's like to be a twin mom, and you're like, well, I can't answer that outside the context of XYZ.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, to the extent that this is a book about parenting, it's because parenting animates every part of my life now, right?
Right.
So everything that I experience in the world is animated by either in the foreground being a father or in the background being a father, right? It is, and that's present in how the word is passed too, right? Like part of what changed the way I wrote and thought about that project was that as soon as I started the project, my son came into the world. And so even the things around like family separation, like whenever I thought about the spectacle, the sort of cruelty of slavery, I largely thought about it through the context of the spectacle of physical brutality that Black people and that enslaved people were, the beatings and the whippings and the torture, and obviously that's a huge part of it. But it wasn't until it became apparent that like family separation came into the foreground of my consciousness, where I was like, oh, this, and I do have one poem about this in the collection, but just thinking about what would it mean if you went to sleep at night. I remember standing in the Whitney plantation, thinking in one of the original slave cabins, and looking at the bed where enslaved people, a version of where enslaved people once slept, and just imagining like what it would be like if I went to sleep one night, put my kids to bed, and I woke up the next day and my children were gone.
Right.
And I had no idea where they went. I had no idea who had taken them. I had no idea if I would ever see them again. It's a sort of unfathomable type of cruelty, a type of horror. And then you realize that this is the omnipresent threat that millions of enslaved people lived under every single day of their lives, that at any moment you could be taken away from your husband, your wife, your brother, your sister, your children, your parent, just for no reason at all. And so that shows up in my previous book in ways that are sometimes more subtle, but it's because of becoming a parent that the emotional stakes and the emotional texture of my understanding of those moments has been changed because I have a different level of empathy as a result of my own parenting. And so in this book, it is all that is the sort of central animating feature, is the sort of both andedness, the all at onceness of what it means to be human in this moment. Like, and for me, that is what it means to hold these moments of watching my child have their first hiccup, or watching my family show up for their first birthday party, or watching, as they discover a ladybug for the first time, or a cicada for the first time, or the first time we go to a beach, or that all of these moments are shared, these interpersonal, granular moments of profound joy amid a backdrop of what often feels like global catastrophe, right? Climate change and war and violence, both domestically, and across the world. I mean, and this is a theme that I think shows up in all of my work, because it's something I will probably wrestle with across, all of my books until I'm gone. But it is that sort of both and, right? Like Counting Descent ostensibly is a book that's mostly about like coming of age as a young Black man, Black child, and thinking of what that means in the midst of it's the sort of emerging Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
But what's true and what shows up in that book is that like we all were watching Black people killed at the hands of police incessantly, felt like, for years. And at that same time, I was falling in love with the woman who would become my wife. Right. And that like those two things happen alongside one another because the human experience is not neatly bifurcated into like you only experience tragedy here and you only experience love and levity here. It's that they are all happening simultaneously and you are figuring out what it means to carry all of that in your body and your spirit together. And so this book is thinking about, losing my grandmother or losing my grandfather while my child is coming into the world, or thinking about the parts of parenting that are, there's so many parts that are amazing and joyous and jubilant. And there are a lot of parts of it that are really hard and really exhausting and really humbling.
Sucky.
Yeah. And it just, and I didn't want to write a book that is like, wow, like parenting, it's amazing. It's only great. it is wonderful. And it's the most challenging, humbling thing I've ever done in my life. And I guess my whole thing that you've kind of touched on is we don't have to write into spaces or talk about things in ways that pretend as if the other parts of any given experience don't exist.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes this collection really great is like the juxtaposition of poems, an ode to a bear hug, followed by a poem about, grief or something like, because it just feels really, it feels like life, right? Like hearing you talk about like taking your kid to the beach for the first time or whatever, next to these other things, it's making me think about January 6th. My kids had just started, they were not just started, but they were walking. They were, we were going to the park a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after nap time, I was getting ready to take them to the park, and I like text my brother, and I can't think it was like a picture of my kids. He's like, "Are you not watching the TV right now?" And I was like, "No, I'm about to take the boys to the park. They just woke up from hit their nap." And he's like, "No, you need to turn on the TV." And then we didn't go to the park that day, which was like a huge, change in our schedule, because at this time, because of COVID, I didn't have help. So I was like very regimented, all this stuff. And like, it always sticks in my head that the way I found out about January 6th was because it was a canceled trip to the park, which made such a big deal to me. And on the flip side, I was at the park when the verdict came out for the George Floyd, that whole situation. And I remember being like, because I'm in LA and LA is notorious for a bazillion helicopters. And there were all these helicopters flying over the park. And it was making me so anxious. Like, and I was like waiting on my phone, and I kept texting my husband being like, I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be outside. I don't want to be around these people. Like, I don't get like, and I was like freaking out. But of course I'm like in the park, like pushing my kid on the swing. So on the outside I look fine, but I'm like feverishly texting my husband and thinking about like the world falling apart while also like being a mom and like don't want to stress my kids out because it really just is a Tuesday at the park. But it's so and right
that's
on.
It. Like that's what it, and I think that's what it is for the rest of our lives as parents, right? Like it is that simultaneity. It is that juxtaposition. It is that sense of, and it's this sort of weird feeling of, and I don't know how you experience, but sometimes I'll have these moments where, something like that is happening in the world, or like Russia just invaded Ukraine. Or you just heard the story in the morning about, like the Ukrainian children who were abducted by, or the children in Afghanistan who don't have any food to eat, or the kids in Detroit who, don't have water, whatever the case may be. And you're like, feeding your kids some Cheerios, or like pushing them in the swing, or it's even it's a sort of cognitive dissonance almost but a kind of cognitive dissonance that you just, I don't want to say learn to live with, because that feels like reductive, but it is, again, that sort of what it means to hold sometimes interpersonal moments of joy or wonder or levity or appreciation or gratitude amid either on a geopolitical scale or within your own family, right? Because it's not always the case that like you have to look abroad for this sort of thing. Sometimes it's like you and your partner are in a fight, you know, or you and your mom just got a scary diagnosis from the doctor, or somebody you can't find your cousin and they don't know where he, it's just that this, and you gotta at the same time like get on the ground and pretend to be a brachiosaurus, right? Because like it's and it's how do we
not the specific brachiosaurus,
always the brachiosaurus, man. And yeah, I'm just so interested in that, right? And in the and that's why I don't know how I would write about that in like a memoir, narrative nonfiction context. Again, that's not to say people write beautiful books, nonfiction projects about parenting that aren't like quote unquote parenting books, like how to do this or how to do that.
Yeah.
But for me, poems feel like the most natural way to simply wrestle with those sorts of things.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody, don't freak out. We have to kind of transition this conversation. However, Clint will be back at the end of the month to discuss poetry because it is April, which is Poetry Month. And we will be talking a lot more. And I have some more questions about your collection specifically. And also we're talking about Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude by Ross Gay. So there will be more poetry conversations, but we do have to transition to Clint's reading life because I have questions. So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to traceythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back. I didn't prep you for this, but every month we do an Ask the Stacks where someone writes in and we have to give them book recommendations.
Okay.
This one,
I think this didn't happen on our last one.
No, because you didn't do the 2-part. Only people who do the 2-part get to do this. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Because last time we talked just about how the word is passed. This time we're going to talk about Clint too.
Yeah.
Normally we start these with like, tell me about yourself, but we sort of just dove in and I don't know, maybe we'll do that in a minute. But so Amy wrote in, this just came in last night. And I thought this was a good one for you. So we'll see. Amy said, I'm looking for a book about dealing with terminally ill loved ones. I really enjoyed Rob Delaney's book, and I really appreciated your episode with Marissa Renee Lee. But I realized most of these books are about loss or after loss, and I'm wondering if you or your guest have any recommendations for caring or coping. I do prefer nonfiction, but I'm open to fiction as well. Some context. I lost a parent to cancer when I was young, and I have a friend whose dad is currently receiving treatment. And so she asked me for recs, and I realized all I could think of were ones after someone died. And I don't think that's great when you're hoping your loved one will pull through something. So first of all, Amy, very sorry to hear about your friend's dad and your experiences. And this is sort of tricky. So I don't know if you have one or two. I wrote down a handful. I can go first or you can go first. You tell me.
Yeah, I appreciate them reaching out with that question. I actually just finished a book that I really appreciated by the poet and writer. I'm not gonna say poet and writer because I hate when people do that because it's like as if poet's not a writer. Poet and essayist, or poet and nonfiction writer, Megan O'Rourke, who
Oh,
wrote a book, The Invisible Kingdom. I think it was a National Book Award finalist last year.
yeah.
And it is adjacent to, I think, what is being asked, but I think there's a lot of overlap. It is about Megan's experience living with chronic illness. And I have people in my life who are also living with chronic illness and are living with conditions that aren't easily diagnosable. And I've seen and witnessed firsthand uh, the sort of grief one experiences living with something that doesn't have a name,
Mm-hmm.
having symptoms that won't go away. And it is an illness that, depending on the nature of the chronic illness, that is killing you at various speeds, right? Like it, and
Right.
so to speak. But I've also seen the sort of emotional toll that it takes on people, and how difficult it is to live with. And part of what she writes about also is what it's like for her family,
Mm-hmm.
to the experience of her husband, the experience of her parents, and how she is both navigating the grief within her, but what it is like for these people around her to feel so helpless.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see this person you love suffering and you want to help them, but you don't.
Yeah.
But you don't know how. The doctors don't even know how. And so it was very helpful because it gave me a lot of language. It gave me a lot of insight into the specific experience of a person who, I think she's been living with her chronic illness for decades.
Yeah.
So it's not quite about grief or people dying in a literal sense, but it is about, this woman is sort of mourning the life that she thought she would have,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then realizing that she is going to have to recalibrate her expectations about what her own life and her conception of her own health will be.
Yeah. I read that. It was
Mm-hmm.
good. You did. You said way more than it was good, but you just,
It
it was good.
was
Yeah, I
cool.
read it. Okay, so I have a few different options for you, Amy, and some of them do end in death and some of them do not. The first kind of category I have is what I call a cancer or death memoir. We've done a few on the podcast. So The Unwinding of the Miracle by Julie Williams. It's her memoir. She does die at the end of the book. It's not a spoiler. It's common knowledge, which we did do an episode on that. And then the other one we did was The Undying, which won the Pulitzer. And it's this woman who gets breast cancer and she sort of like talks about her experiences and also the medical community and all of these things. And then the third one that fits in this category would be When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Calathini, which is very well known. Again, he's a young doctor who gets cancer, has to drop out, and he also ends up dying. So two of those people do die, one of those people don't, but those are all sort of in the same first person cancer memoir. The other one I would suggest is called My Own Country by Abraham Verghese. And I love him. He wrote that book, Cutting for Stone, as well. And he is a doctor. And he, at the beginning of his medical career, he ends up in Tennessee, rural Tennessee in the early 1980s, and he's an infectious disease specialist. And so he is treating people for HIV and AIDS at the beginning of the crisis, when a lot of people either are treating people in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, or are not treating people at all. And he talks about kind of being with people who are sick and who are dying and what that experience is like for him. It's not exactly what you've asked for, but I do think that it speaks to sort of this being present among the ill and among the people who are dying. And then the last one is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, another doctor. And he writes sort of about the end of life care system. So this one's like, it's got some, narrative nonfiction vibes to it, but it's a little bit more nonfiction-y than the other ones. It's definitely not a memoir, but he's talking about terminal illness and how we deal with that as individuals and as communities. So sort of a lot of recommendations because I don't know that anything's exactly what what you've asked for, but I think they're all really good recommendations. I just want to add one more thing. And I don't have a specific book recommendation, but I'll share a personal story. When my father was ill and he was ill for a long time and then he went into hospice care, and a family friend gave me this like little paperback book that was like how to say goodbye to your loved ones. Like it was like sort of like a end of life how to type book, maybe 50, maybe 100 pages. And I don't remember the name, but it was very helpful. And I think, especially in this space where it's like, we're a literary podcast and we want like great writing and all of these things. This book is not necessarily that, but it was really helpful to think about how the end of life will be and potentially feel and what it might look like. And so I don't know, you said your friend's not quite there yet, but it might be something to get for her if it does end up that way, because it's sort of a book that I would never have purchased for myself. And I read it in, one sitting or whatever. And, it's not great, but I read it and I obviously don't remember the title. I'll try to find it. If I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes. But that's another kind of book that might be helpful. That's maybe not like a super compelling read, but might be like a useful read. Amy, if you read it, you have to tell us any of these books. You have to tell us what you think. And anyone who wants a book recommendation, email askthestacks@thestackspodcast.com. Okay, Clint, we're transitioning to your reading life. And since we didn't do this at the beginning, will you just tell people a little bit about yourself and maybe like a little bit about your relationship to books, like when you remember first like getting into reading or whatever that means to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I told this story on the first podcast, but I always remember in third grade where my teacher, Miss Mueller, she had us write poems about colors. And I wrote about the color gray. I don't know why. I was a strange and solemn child. But I remember how the poem goes. It was a version of, I hate the color gray. It reminds me of a rainy day. Gray, I really hate that color. It's annoying, like my little brother. And I remember she came over to me and she looked at the poem on the desk in front of me. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Clint, that was beautiful. You can be a writer when you grow up."
Oh.
For all I know, she could have said that to every single kid in the class. For all I know, she could have like said that out loud and in her head be like, "Man, I need to recommend this kid to mental health. Like he's going through a dark period or something." But I remembered that moment for the rest of my life. And that's not to say that like I'm creating a neat linear causal relationship or line between the moment in third grade where Miss Mueller said this and then, me being a writer today. But
is she still alive?
She is still alive. She came to I had a reading in New Orleans, maybe a year or two ago. It was sometime in the How the Word Is Passed tour. But she came. It was the first time I saw her in decades. And it was so wonderful, right? And
did you tell that story? Did you have your Adele moment?
I think she heard it on, because I think I've told that story a couple times on a couple radio programs, and I remember it's funny because I've been a teacher and I've said things to kids that I've meant very earnestly, but I don't remember at all, right? And she's just like, it's so wonderful that you remembered that. That means so much. I'm pretty sure she did not remember saying that. But she found it really meaningful that I did. And it was wonderful. We took a picture, together and it was very sweet. So I guess I just say that because like reading and writing I've been instilled both from my teachers and from my family with this sense that like writing was something that I was capable of. There was always this belief that was instilled in me that like, this is something that if you want, you can do. At various points in my life, I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cute. But like, I'm going to be a professional soccer player. So I have no need for this information. Like I'm going to play for Arsenal and live in London. It's going to be great. It didn't work out like that. And here we are. But I should say for all those on podcasts who don't know that my team is currently above Tracy's team.
Barely.
By 5 points. There's 12 games left in the season. I'm not going to turn this into a why Arsenal are better than Manchester City podcast or why it would be better.
Well, you took our entire team and our coach, so sorry that you're just trying to copy us. I don't know. I just feel like it's like get your own identity, right? Like,
or
what is this?
A sort of student becomes the master sort of thing.
Okay.
So we're going to win this Premier League title. It's going to be great. Anyway, I thought I would be a part of that. I'm not a part of that. I'm a mere writer. But because of that, writing and reading have always been very intertwined, right? Like I always was told that if you want to be a better writer, you need to read more. And it was just always part of my life. My mom always brought us to the library in New Orleans. I was very big on the summer reading contest.
Challenge.
Oh my gosh. Like, and maybe this is the thing a lot of writers tell you, but like I was very, very into it. Because I was so motivated to win that personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut. I was like, I don't know. I can't remember if you were allowed to get more than one, but I was like, I'm going to get like 7 pizzas, right? I'm going to read 7,000 pages and get 7 pizzas. And it's interesting. I mean, we probably don't have time to get into this, but like there is an interesting relationship for me between my life as a writer and thus a reader and my a competition. It's interesting. I'm like making these connections in real time on your podcast. So thank you for becoming my therapist.
Exclusively. You heard it here first, people.
But it is interesting, right? Because like I was so motivated by the competition of the summer reading contest at the public library. When I realized when I was like 19 and had my sort of existential crisis of like because I got a scholarship to play soccer in college. I played at Davidson College, but I didn't really play. And so this thing that had been the center of my identity growing up, like I was always Clint the soccer player. That's what I was known as. That was my social identity. That was my athletic identity. That was who I understood myself to be in the world. And suddenly I got to school. I was playing at this D1 school, which would have been my dream. And I wasn't playing a lot. And so I was kind of trying to figure out like who I was off the field in a way that I had never had to before. And it was the summer of 2008 when I was between my sophomore and junior year in college. I went to the New York Poets Cafe. And New York Poets Cafe, for those who don't know, is this poetry cafe on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, this legendary spot. I mean, so many of the writers you love and poets you love have like come from that space or graced that stage. Mo Brown was the longtime host and curator of the Friday Night Poetry Slam. And I remember I went, and this was when I was a sort of like disillusioned English major. You know, we were reading Keats and Yeats and Whitman and Frost and all these folks who at the time I had a difficult time accessing because it felt like that was the only way that I felt like I was being taught that was the only way poetry could look. And I've stepped into this space where, it's full of Black people and brown people and, people speaking different languages and people and like Biggie is playing on the, on the stereo and people are drinking and laughing. And I was like, is this a poetry show? Like, what is this? Right. And I will always remember, one of the first poems I ever heard was by a woman who had cerebral palsy. And she got on stage and did this poem. And in 3 minutes, the way I thought about an entire demographic of people completely changed. Like I left that night never thinking about disability the same way again. And I remember being like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know what spoken word poetry is, but I want to do it. And I went back to Davidson and I was on the soccer team. We showed up for preseason. My friends were playing FIFA and I was like, y'all, I think I'm going to be a poet. Everybody turned around and be like, a poet? Like what? Like, boo, you're whack. Like, shut up. And I started a poetry group at Davidson and we kind of cosplayed Dead Poet Society. We got together in the main academic building on Sunday nights and wrote poems and read poems and shared poems. And it was, but part of what the connection I'm making is that there was also a big slam poetry scene in Charlotte, North Carolina, which was just 20 minutes away from Davidson. And I was just I would go to this thing every time they had a poetry slam. And I would enter the poetry slam and I was trash and I was terrible and I would lose in the first round. But there was something about the competitive framework of it that tapped into the part of me that had been an athlete my whole life, that also tapped into the part of me that made me want to win the personal pan pizza from the public library, that served as an entry point into literature that allowed me to recalibrate my relationship to literature, to then go back to Keats and Yeats and Frost and Whitman and access them and appreciate them in a different sort of way. Because it was like, oh, I have a more expansive understanding of what literature can be. And now I can appreciate the canon, so to speak, for what it offers and also critique it for what it doesn't. But yeah, one thing that has been a sort of animating feature of my life is the way that competition or competitive infrastructure has facilitated my relationship to literature in ways that are very clear to me. I don't know if that's to say that it's like healthy or good necessarily, but
competition is great.
I'm there with you, but I know that's not the case for everybody.
And a lot of people in like the literary space don't find the value in competition. And I mean, for me, it's just like a personal motivating factor. Like I'm super competitive with myself, and I'm also privately competitive with other people, but never publicly unless they deserve it. Which isn't to say it won't happen one day, but I try to keep it together. But I think there's like I think a lot of people who are in literary and art spaces come to it from not necessarily from an athletic background first. And so they don't see the value in competition. And I'm, as you know, a big sports person. And like, that's what motivates me. Competition with myself. Like how many boxes can I check on my to-do list?
Yeah.
You know, like just like all that kind of stuff.
This is why we got to find each other on Peloton so we can try to outdo each other.
I am competitive with people I know from the book space on Peloton in a very creepy way. Like
Is there a Peloton Bookstagram community?
I think I have one of the hashtags or something, but like some authors, because you can see that I have a Peloton in the background, I like follow now. Like I shouldn't name Nate. I'm gonna name a name. So like Justin Tinsley is on Peloton, and I follow him, and I'll purposely take classes he's taken to try to like beat him. Like really creepy like that.
Take this biggie biographer.
Yeah, I'm like, good, nice try, Tins. But I sometimes beat him, just FYI.
Yeah. I do want to say about the competitive piece that, like, for me, I think it was very helpful as an entry point into literature, right? It was helpful when I was a kid, and it was helpful when I was I needed a thing that would serve as a bridge for me coming from sports being the center of my life to now making books the center of my life. I do think that one of the things about, like, in the literary space, so to speak, that competition can be like a really debilitating thing. And so my competitive instincts don't exist in the same way in the context of my current work. Like I'm not, like I have no sense of desire to compete for like prizes and stuff.
Sure.
Like certainly I'm immensely grateful that, you know, if I'm nominated, if I win, and you know, I experienced some of that with How the Word Is Passed, and it's amazing. But it's not, there's no, like, I'm not out here being like, you know, who's a person we both know, like, all right, David Dennis, like, I'm gonna get that National Book Critics Circle Award. You know, like, it's not like that at all. No, because part of it is you realize that, like, so much of that is beyond your control, right? Yes. There's so much that it has nothing to do with you. And if you use those external realities and prizes and bestseller lists or all of that to be the thing, to be your metric for whether your book is successful or not, that's not a healthy relationship to your work.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I'm competitive. And so I would be like, I'm going to win a National Book Award. It wouldn't necessarily be like, I need to beat Clint, but it would be like, but like, I'm also very goal oriented. So for me, it's sort of one and the same. It's like, okay, these are the things I want to check off my list. And like, I have a lot of lists where things are written down that I like to check them off.
I got you.
Okay, we have to talk about your books. People are going to be so mad. We're not going to get to a lot of the questions, but we're going to do our best. 2 books you love, 1 book you hate.
I'm just looking at what's on my desk right now. I love friend of the pod, Patrick Radden Keefe's Empire of Pain. I mean, Patrick Radden Keefe's everything.
Is he perfect? What's up with him?
Is he? We had lunch when he came in town for his Rogues tour, and he's, you know, when there's just certain people you meet and you're like, you're actually cooler than I thought you were, because you're like, am I going to be disappointed? This person's writing means so much to me. He's just like a cool ass dude. Yeah, just a cool ass dude. You know, just a good dude. Yeah. I mean, he's among the best of the best in the history of narrative nonfiction. So anything by Patrick Radden Keefe, but I'm looking at Empire of Pain right now. Another book I love, Jhumpa Lahiri, Interpreter Maladies, Pulitzer Prize winning fiction collection. The characters in her book and the worlds she writes about have ostensibly nothing to do with me or my life. And yet I feel so many parts of me feel so seen. And I think her work is such a beautiful example of the way that writing into granular experiences and specific experiences can carry these universal themes of loss and longing and transition. And it's, she's an incredible, incredible writer. And one that I hate, man. I really did not like The Sun Also Rises. Like, I've tried really hard. I love The Old Man and the Sea. It's very short. It's like you could read it in one sitting. It's kind of a novella. I thought that was very good. And I was like, okay, Hemingway. So this is after I watched the Ken Burns documentary. Okay. And I was like, this is a writer who's central to the American canon, who I realized that like I've not really engaged with. And so I read Old Man and the Sea, and I was like, cool. Like, I really enjoy this book. And then I read The Sun Also Rises, which is one of his most critically acclaimed books. And I was just like, this is not it. Like, it just did not do it for me. So,
sorry, Ernest.
It's
better luck next time with your little books.
You're a good fisherman, but
nice try.
It was, and some people love it, and that's again, like that's art, that's literature, that's how it goes. But for me, I was very underwhelmed. It's not often that I don't finish a book, but I like got halfway through, and I was like, I can't keep going with this. Yeah.
What are you reading right now?
So, a couple things. I just finished This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub, who is a writer who's a big presence in the literary space because she owns those bookstores in New York, and I think she seems like a very kind person. I don't know that I've met her in person. I might have met her in person very briefly one time, but didn't know her. But I kept seeing her work around, and I read her latest novel, and it was really great. One of the things that I enjoyed was the relationship between the daughter and father. It was rich, it was complex, it was nuanced. It's about this woman who like travels back in time, but it's a sort of meta time travel novel because she's aware that like it's absurd that she's traveling, but she's like, wait, this is weird. Like, I'm not in Back to the Future. What's going on? And so, but I thought it was really well done. I just read a novel by my friend, the poet Kaveh Akbar, who just sold his novel to Knopf. I think it's going to come out early 2024. Called Martyr. Extraordinary. Just like blew me away. It is so good. This novel is going to make a huge splash.
Can't wait to add it to my 2024 list.
There you go. And then my friend and old advisor, Matthew Desmond. His new
I'm reading that right now.
Oh, man.
Poverty by America?
Poverty by America.
I'm on chapter 2.
Matt is, it's a different vibe.
Totally different. He's not trying to win a Pulitzer Prize with this one.
Yeah, it's a different situation, but he's one of the most generous, thoughtful, rigorous people. Like when I think of the model academic, like I think of somebody like Matt, who he's such a good person and is so earnest in his commitment to his work. Yeah. And part of this book, what this book is a reflection of his commitment to rigorous analysis and engagement with like a big, like poverty. Why do we have poverty in America? Yeah. And his commitment to excavating the answers to that so that we might more effectively create policy, so that we might more effectively build the sort of world in which there are not millions of people living in poverty. And so it's cool to see a book that is an extension of someone's sort of larger personal commitments. And this is very much one of those types of books.
Yeah. And I should say, I said he's not trying to win a Pulitzer with this. I mean that in not in a complimentary or disparaging way. It's just so different from Evicted. Evicted is like this like narrative nonfiction and like really weaving things. And so far, this book is much more like facts and figures. Here's what's going on. Like, if we want to change it, this is what we need to do. And generally, those types of books aren't like Pulitzer-y books, is what I meant. Yeah. But it's really well done, and I'm super into it. I just didn't want people to think I was shitting on him by being like, it's not a Pulitzer. It's just not the same. It's not that kind of book.
It's a different type of book.
Yeah, but it's really good. What's a book you like to recommend to people?
Pachinko. by Min Jin Lee. Yeah, I think about it all the time. I always tell people I'm the president of the Pachinko fan club.
I don't know. You might have to fight Imani Perry on that. She's a
Oh.
huge fan of that book.
Oh man, I remember this was one of your fiction projects.
I tried to read it.
It just wasn't for you?
I need to read it for the podcast because I need to know that someone's going to talk to me about it at the end because it was a little slow for me. I got 100 pages in and I was like, you know what? I can't do it on my own. I need help. Throw me a lifeline. I see your beautiful bookshelves behind you. How do you organize your books?
Right now, there's no organization. It is
welcome to my world.
It's bad. No, so we recently moved into a new spot and there's no rhyme or reason to anything. Like what you see in this frame is not all the books that are like around me on the floor. So I roughly have a nonfiction, fiction, and poetry section. So that is the extent of the organization, but it's in my ideal world, it's alphabetized because there are moments I often want to look for a book and then have no idea where it is. So I do want to create a more streamlined system, but I currently don't have it at all right now. One thing I'm not a fan of, and
it's me. You don't like color. I hear it. I hear it coming in your voice.
Oh, man, I don't.
I literally could hear it.
Do you color coordinate?
I do.
I don't understand.
I have a very visual memory, so I can remember a book. I oftentimes have no clue who wrote a book. Sometimes I don't even know the title of the book. I just remember what the cover looked like. And I'm like, oh, what was that book? Wasn't that book about X, Y, and Z? So for me, if I can color code, it's very easy for me to remember. And oftentimes I can even remember when a book has a different color spine than the cover, which is the most fucked up thing that publishers do to people like me. I'm like, oh, your book's yellow, but the spine's green. What are you doing? Why?
Oh man. That's fair. That's fair. I guess for me, sometimes it feels like I'm stepping into like the paint section of an Ace Hardware store. And it just is. That's
how I feel.
That's, and look, Ace is a very useful place. You get a lot of stuff there. Shout out to Home
Hardware
Depot. But I will not be joining you in the color-coded
I love it
world.
here. We're always accepting new people, but no
I'll
pressure.
I'll wait for you from over here.
Yeah, no pressure. I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it because I want to hear you shout them out. Favorite bookstore?
Loyalty Bookstore. My people.
Yes.
It's out here in Maryland in Silver Spring. They run the show.
They're the best. Okay, this is our speed round. Last book that made you laugh.
You know, it's interesting, and we're going to talk about his book, but Ross Gay's Inciting Joy. And why it made me laugh out loud was because I listened to the audiobook and there were parts of it where Ross is laughing on the audiobook, and it's just, and like I start laughing because Ross is laughing, and you're like, you must look like a silly, like when you're walking down the street and like, who's this probably? Maybe the people assume you're on the phone and your friend told a joke, but like it was just I hadn't heard that in an audiobook before. Like usually that kind of thing is edited out, but he's reading something and he thinks it's very funny, and then he starts laughing, and then you're laughing because his laugh is so infectious. That was the last one that made me laugh out loud.
What's the last book that made you angry?
This is going to be a sort of roundabout way, but a book that I loved was from my friend and colleague, Ed Yong, An Immense World.
Yes.
And it's such a fantastic book about the sort of senses, broadly about the senses of other animals and like how they experience the world so differently than us because of the different senses they have, right? The different way they see the world, the different way they hear the world, they taste the world, all of these. And I say it made me angry because I was already, feeling anxiety, as so many of us do, about climate change and all of the ways that our planet is changing so rapidly because of things that we are doing to it. But I think seeing how this book, more than anything I've ever read, made me more fully appreciate the world around me and like the animals around me, the natural world around me in a way that I never had. And I'm somebody who like loves animal documentaries. Like I will watch a nature documentary like every day of the week if I could. But like, it was like the feeling you get from watching a great David Attenborough documentary, but like rendered with beautiful language. And that's what Ed did. And I was it makes me angry to think that we are moving toward a world in which so many of these remarkable creatures no longer exist.
Okay, I'm just going to do two more. What's a book you would assign to high school students? As I know you're a teacher, though not a high school teacher. Are you?
Mm-hmm.
No.
I was a high school teacher.
You were, but not anymore.
I'm not anymore. I miss it every day. We already brought his name up, but I would really love to see David Dennis's book assigned in high schools. I've read a lot of civil rights books, and this one was one of the most intimate and most personal. And I so appreciated getting to see the civil rights movement, the impact that it had on people in ways that are not filled with glory. And also the impact that it had on those people's children, right? Yeah. Like David, and it just, that's not always part of the story, is what is sacrificed both from the individual, but also from that individual's family in order to try to build a more just. And so I keep telling David, I was like, this book, I had high expectations for David, but this is phenomenal. Yeah. It was so good. And I'm so proud to have been in the same, for those who don't know, me and David Dennis went to college together.
With Steph Curry. With Steph Curry, right? The light skin trio.
Oh man. I think the light skin trio. Yes. I think I'm a little bit more brown. But,
you're the darkest of the three.
But yeah, we were all there. Eating our chicken parm in the cafeteria. But David, we were in the same poetry class in college, and to see what's happened with his career. I mean, he's like the ESPN guy now.
I know.
It's amazing.
Well, David, now that I know this about David, he's going to have to write us a poetry collection on parenting, because he's also a parent. And you guys can compete. Bam. Oh my gosh. And we can host it on a bonus episode of The Stacks, the slam poetry competition between the Davidson boys.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, last one. If you could require the current president of the United States to read one book, what would it be?
It's interesting. This is going to be the Venn diagram of last time I was on the show, because I think one of the questions you asked me last time was if you could have your book read by one person, who would it be? And I said Frederick Douglass. And I remember just being like, I hope you think it's good, please. Yeah. But I would have Biden read Prophet of Freedom by David Blight, which is a biography of Frederick Douglass, and one of the most extraordinary biographies I've ever read. And just is such a detailed treatment of one of the most important people in world history. And one of the people who has helped shape the landscape and the possibilities for this country in ways that few other Americans have. And so I was so glad that, David, David's also a historian without whom there would be no How the Word is Passed. There's many historians who I relied on for that project, but David's work on public memory and history and how all of that fits into the sort of larger historiography of slavery is second to none. And he's just a good dude, very generous. His book is extraordinary.
I love it. Just like last time when you were here, we went way over. People, don't be mad. Just enjoy. You got bonus time with Clint Smith. Don't write me a letter. I won't read it. Clint, and even more bonus time, Clint will be back on April 26th to discuss Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude by Ross Gay for our Poetry Book Club episode. Very excited. Clint, thank you so much for being here.
It was a pleasure. Always fun.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Clint Smith for being our guest. He'll be back on April 26th for our book club discussion of Ross Gay's 2015 poetry collection, Catalog Unabashed Gratitude. I also want to say a quick thank you to Lena Little for helping to make this conversation possible. If you love the show and you want inside access to it, head to patreon.com/The Stacks and join the Stacks Pack. Make sure you're subscribed to The Stacks wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out our website, thestackspodcast.com. This episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Lauren Tyree. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagira Gis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.